telling all sides of the story. This is The Rita Cosby Show.
And you knew it was going to get to this. They are already threatening judges, the highest justices in the land of the Supreme Court. To me, this is outrageous, and we're going to talk about it tonight on The Rita Cosby Show. What are your thoughts about the fact that now the justices that were named in that draft that was leaked, remember the Supreme Court leak about the potential overturning of Roe v. Wade, the ones who were listed on there who were supportive of overturning Roe v. Wade in the draft opinion, again, remember that was leaked. Well, guess what? Now their homes are listed on maps that are being basically distributed by many, many liberal groups. To me, this is outrageous. And tonight, I want to hear your thoughts about these far left tactics. I am so sick of this mob mentality by the far left. How dare this group say, here's the homes of these justices, come out to their house, go and bother their neighbors. I mean, this is just outrageous. And it reminds me of this whole sort of mob mentality. Nobody on the left so far basically has been condemning whatsoever the leak, saying that this was not an appropriate thing to be doing. Again, they don't even know if this is going to be the final decision. It's just a draft. And all it would essentially do, again, is go back to the states. But yet, the Democrats right now are trying to really play hardball and say, here are the justices that were looking at overturning Roe v. Wade that are part of this decision. Here's their home address. They were doxing them all over the place, putting out a map. In fact, it's like, like when you go to visit a town and you go see where celebrities live and they're like, hey, this is where Elvis lived and this is where so-and-so lived. Now they are doing a map that says, here is where this justice lives. Here's where another one lives. And guess what? A lot of them actually also live in Virginia. So they don't live too far from, the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court there in Washington, D.C. A lot of people commute from Virginia. It's not far, obviously, from Washington, D.C. And how outrageous that because they do not like their decision, they are not out there condemning the leak. And instead, they are condoning basically protest and violence. To me, it is outrageous. And it reminds me so much of the, quote, Summer of Love. Remember, that was all over the country, that it was like, oh, we are out here peacefully protesting. And then you see Ali Veshi from MSNBC, and it looked like he was in like Somalia or in Ukraine with like flames thrown all behind him. And yet, oh, it's a peaceful protest. Really? Are you kidding me? And yet, January 6th, all they do is hammer January 6th, January 6th, January 6th. What about the $2 billion plus worth of damage that took place by the left, mostly with those rallies that turned violent? And many of them were not even rallies. I'm just being kind by calling them rallies. They were riots. And you saw police stations burn down, and you saw all these other things burn down. And to me, this is so outrageous. Even the president of the United States was asked about the leak. And I've been waiting in the last 24, 48 hours. What would the president do? Here he is. He needs to set a tone for the country. And the right thing to do would say, we should not be leaking. We will go after the leaker. There will be a full investigation. I don't support it on any side, no matter whatever it is. This cannot happen. We have to throw the book at this person. No, he's not doing that. His White House press secretary, who's only going to be there for a little bit of time now, and is going to have a replacement coming in. We're going to talk about her later on because she's even more left than Circle Back Psaki. Oh, my goodness. And if you thought things were bad and circling back now, they're going to be doing a 360s. If it was a 180 circle with, Circle Back Psaki, it's going to be 360 plus with this new one. This one is like far hardcore left. I mean, this is like, we are in for a rough ride, guys. I think it is outrageous that liberals are putting out the addresses of Supreme Court justices just because they do not like where this draft opinion that got leaked, where it is going. Can you imagine? This is like mob rule. It's like, we don't like what you're doing, so we're going to come to your house. We're not only going to leak the decision. Again, we don't know who leaked it, but I have a strong suspicion who leaked it, right? And most people believe it was like a liberal court clerk or somebody on that side with that objective because they seem to be the ones with the motive. Again, we don't know. But if you surmise that, first of all, an unprecedented leak, and then you now have, they're not happy with that. So let's continue the mob rule, and let's not just only trying to ruin the whole institution of the Supreme Court. Let's try to ruin all the justices too. And let's try to go to their home and terrorize them and see if we can maybe get them to change their decision or be shamed from society and basically brand them, with a scarlet letter because they are not in the same political camp or political thought or belief in this case. This case isn't even political. They're saying it's the Constitution, that the Constitution doesn't provide this, so we're sending it back to the states. That was the philosophy from Justice Alito. And they don't agree with that. And if you don't agree with them, they're going to terrorize you. They're going to show up at your house. They're going to bother you and your children. They're going to follow you into your office. They're going to leak your draft opinion. They're probably going to go down and burn your business down like we saw in New York City and so many other cities. They're going to go after police stations. They're going to use this. You just sort of see, unfortunately, sadly, I think a very dangerous path that we may be on. If only within a day or two, they're already willing to do this. And listen, there are obviously good people on all sides of the aisle, but there's some really bad apples that are out there, and they are definitely trying to push decisions by mob rule. And this is a very dangerous thing for a civil society. And all I could think about when I saw that they were putting out the addresses of the Supreme Court justices who they didn't like were pushing to change Roe v. Wade and send it back to the states. Well, when I saw that, it reminded me of this moment, remember, during the Derek Chauvin sentencing. And remember, Maxine Waters, the congresswoman from California, was so outraged. And she said, you know what, if you're not happy, get in their face. Take a listen to this.
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
Isn't that stunning? That moment said it all. But yet they're saying Republicans are the ones making threats? Are you kidding me? Let's go to Edward on line 8. Go ahead, Edward, your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to say that the city of Minneapolis paid $80 million in settlements since 2003, so there obviously must have been issues happening within that department. And I also want to say the difference between the rhetoric of both sides.
So wait. Hang on one second, Edward. Hang on, Edward. Hold on one second. You talk about that the department, you're talking about the police department had to pay some funds, is what you're saying.
$80 million since 2003, so there must have been indiscretions. And
by the way, Edward, I don't discount you that there are overreaches in different departments across the country. What I discount, and I think obviously if there's any inequities, and by the way, I've come out on the George Floyd case, Edward, and I don't know if you've called him before, but on the George Floyd case, when I saw it, it was horrible. I think it was absolutely wrong. Derek Chauvin should not have had his knee on the neck of the guy. It was outrageous, and they should have thrown the book at him, and they did. And that was absolutely correct. So I'm not one of those people who, it's like the sky is purple. I know that it's blue. So when I do see an issue, but you also have to admit that there are a lot of great police officers out there, and predominantly there are spectacular officers out there that are trying to do the best they can, men and women who are working with the community, and they don't deserve to be smeared with this big, broad brush. And in the case of people that were screaming, I mean, what I saw firsthand, I mean, I saw them screaming, shouting, throwing things at the officers. I mean, we saw video all over the country of them like throwing bricks at officers and chairs at officers and injuring officers and that kind of mob mentality and burning of buildings. I mean, how is that helping any community? You know, not even, and I'm just saying any community, and even African-American community. How is that helping many of the people that were out there protesting? And I think a lot of them had noble missions. And if they're out there peacefully, I'm all for peaceful protests, Edward. Where I draw the line is when they start lighting a match and breaking into people's businesses and burning businesses and hurting people. That's where it's totally wrong.
Draw the line at lies. You draw the line at lies. Spreading a big lie that the election was stolen by Satan, that's ridiculous. And that didn't happen. And the president and all these people were spreading that lie, and they inflamed these people on January 6th that were violent. And, you know. And by
the way, Edward, I did not like when I saw anybody injured on January 6th. You know, I mean, there were some cases where some officers, you know, were assaulted, and there's been many of these reports that I've heard about it. I don't like that at all. But you seem to be not. Let's focus on what I'm talking about right now, because don't you have a problem with people burning down businesses? If you could just kind of give me an answer on that. For some reason, you're struggling to condemn those rioters. All riots are bad.
The Minnesota Human Rights Department just came out with a
Edward, that's not what I'm asking you about. Edward, did you see the pictures across America? Did you see the pictures where there was looting and there was burning? And there were a lot of things that where people were just out there. I'm not talking about any specific case. I am talking about in general. You seem to have a problem condemning that group, and that's a problem.
These people's problems issues have not been listened to.
So burn it down. Burn down, Edward. So the payback is burn down strangers' businesses and beat up cops. Are you kidding me?
Also, what about all the Proud Boys and the other people that were caught that were doing
Edward,
that as well?
Edward, I'm talking about the rioting. I'm talking about the burning. You think it's okay to go to a Supreme Court justice's house and maybe start to bother them and their kids? And you think that's okay?
There's a lot of people on both sides that play that game, and some of them play it against each other. So it's not, it's not as black and white as you think that, but the fact of the matter is that the majority of people are out there, and they're out there because they're mad and they're upset. Their friends and family members and they themselves have experienced personal trauma.
Well, and so they're gonna inflict it on somebody else. And by the way, Edward, I do believe there are cases of that, and I am all for people protesting. When I saw people out there protesting peacefully, whatever the issue is, and if it's something that a number of them were protesting about, I think that's great. That's what America's all about, is protesting and creating change and people to come together and to find ways to bridge things. But by assaulting officers and assaulting innocent people and burning businesses down, that is outrageous. And that is not appropriate, no matter who does it. Bottom line, Edward, and you need to also realize that group, you seem to think it's okay because they're angry that they have a right to destroy property and hurt other people. That is not America, and that's not appropriate, Edward. It has to be fair on all sides. Well, we've had a spirited night here on the Rita Cosby Show, listening to Crazy Edward, who thinks that it is okay to basically riot and loot and burn down cities if you don't get your way, if you feel maligned. I obviously totally disagree, and I hope most of you out there, if not all of you, I hope, totally disagree with that. And to me, this is very concerning because it's that kind of rhetoric that we saw that was dealing with the protests that we saw, all those riots and looting that we saw not that long ago in the United States. And now here it is again. And the new news in just the last few hours is they are fortifying some of the structures and some of the protections outside the Supreme Court because some of the protesters that have been out there have been pretty vocal. That's a nice way to say they've been saying nasty things outside the Supreme Court after this leak of the Supreme Court decision. And then a number of groups have come out there, these sort of far left groups. And everyone's wondering, first of all, how are they funded? That's another thing, too. You know what's interesting? When everything happened when this leak broke, remember just a few nights ago, and it was right before we came on the show, everybody was wondering, and we had a number of you guys out there that were calling, and I thought it was really powerful. How did everybody get out there so quick and also have those signs? Remember, they had all the protest signs, and some of them looked like they were pre-produced and ready. It was sort of this whole sort of basically orchestrated effort. And now we are hearing a number of groups are planning to demonstrate. And these activists are organizing under the moniker, it's called Ruth Sent Us. And this group has basically published online the supposed home addresses of Justices Amy Coney Barrett, John Roberts, Justice Alito, Kavanaugh, Clarence Thomas, and Neil Gorsuch. And because they do not like what they are saying, let's go to their house and protest. Boy, things are getting really ugly very quickly. And here's also a little bit more from this group. I want to read it again. It's called Ruth Sent Us, and nobody knows who this group is, but they seem pretty organized, and they seem to have some funding. And they're saying that our 6-3 extremist Supreme Court routinely issues rulings that hurt women, racial minorities, LGBTQ, and immigrant rights. And the group website reads, we must rise up to force accountability using a diversity of tactics. Does that sound peaceful to you? That sounds to me that they are looking to start some pretty serious protests that could get unruly pretty quickly across the country. And they are very quickly doxing and putting out the address of these individuals on the Supreme Court. And that's really frightening. And then we have leaders like our senators, our Democratic senators that are representing us across the country. You got Senator Schumer of New York. You got Senator Gillibrand of New York, two Democrats. They are also not calming people down. Listen to some of the rhetoric from them. Here you go.
Senator Schumer, are you at all concerned about the leak that happened about what it means for the institution itself and a draft opinion for the first time ever?
Well, the Supreme Court's looking into that, but to compare a leak to taking away the rights of over 100 million women and saying the leak is more important, give me a break. Forget it.
If you're really concerned about that, why don't we look at the testimony of the justices who said they wouldn't do this?
What did it say about it?
Okay.
It's a lie, and we've never had fraudulent testimony in the Supreme Court before. This is unprecedented to have justices commit fraud during hearings. So if you want to talk about process, I would focus on that process.
Wow. So they're not condemning the leak, and they're just outraged, and they want everybody else out there to be outraged. That sounds like similar rhetoric to what sparked a lot of the problems that we saw over the summer. And take a listen. Here is Sunny Hostin, one of the hosts on The View, who says some of this tensions and this violence and all that stuff, they're not blaming the Democrats. They're blaming President Trump. It's like everything. If it's raining today, it's President Trump's fault. Take a listen.
Will Smith wasn't particularly right-leaning and running up on the stage and smacking Chris Rock.
No,
so
but I do think that Trump unleashed some incivility, at least, in our country.
We don't know anything about this person that went up there.
No, but wait a second. You don't,
We
notice that there's a certain amount of impulse control lacking in the population
And a
these
lot
days?
of studies attained or said that was in particular in regards to people being locked down inside, not in particular being locked down inside and staring at President Trump.
Trump really, he made the pandemic into like a cold.
Well,
remember?
I think
he handled it so poorly.
We've stopped. We forgot how to laugh.
Yeah, they forgot how to laugh, and they're blaming everything on Trump. And you don't think the rhetoric that the left is saying right now is inflaming things? Is there anybody out there who thinks it's appropriate for this liberal group that no one's even heard of, Ruth Sent Us, publishing the home addresses of these justices that they did not like, were going against Roe v. Wade, trying to basically pressure the justices, threaten them at their homes because they don't like the draft copy of this opinion that came out? Boy, are we some third world nation, or are we America, where people are supposed to be able to openly discuss things like a democracy and people could have different opinions, but you don't go to their house and threaten them. And this group is publicly advocating for it now. And this decision, the draft just came out. So boy, this to me is really scary stuff. And joining us now as we celebrate Cinco de Mayo is George P. Bush, Texas Land Commissioner, also Navy vet and candidate for Texas Attorney General. First off, what does Cinco de Mayo mean to you and your heritage, George P. Bush?
Feliz Cinco de Mayo, Rita. It's great to be with you on this fabulous Cinco de Mayo. It's a well-recognized holiday in states like Texas, but lots of great traditions in the Bush family household, whether that's sampling my mom's tamales or any new sauces that she or my dad would put together. I know my dad, when he was in the campaign trail, would talk about his handmade guacamole, which would be pretty spicy and definitely a Bush family favorite. But it's I think I'm very proud of my Mexican American heritage, and with Hispanics being now close to a majority in a state like mine, like Texas, and a majority minority state, it's just a nice time to reflect upon the contributions, whether it's in our nation's military. I believe there are dozens of Congressional Medal of Honor recipients of Hispanic heritage, and a vast amount of Latinos that serve in public service roles, whether it's law enforcement or as first responders in states like ours. And as hopefully the next top law enforcement official in Texas, I definitely want to honor their work and all Texans that serve in these honorable roles. So it's a great day, and hoping people drive safe on a day like today as well, and working hard as well.
Absolutely, because you're right. Many people are celebrating. Talk about your family's history. Of course, your dad is Jeb Bush, your mom, Columba. Explain the background of the two of them, because your mother was born in Mexico.
She was. My dad was in high school at the time, and as part of an exchange program, learned Spanish by teaching English at a Catholic school in León, Guanajuato, and that's where they kept a long-distance relationship. He actually wrote her over the course of his senior year in high school. My grandmother, Barbara Bush, said, son, you can't get married until you get your college degree. So he graduated from the University of Texas in a record 2 years, Phi Beta Kappa, and so that he could marry my mom at the age of at 21. So he was a man that was after his plan to marry my mom. And yes, the Mexican tradition is one that we uphold in the Bush family household. And my mother responsibly went through the legal application for citizenship in our household. And I talk about that experience on the campaign trail, that we need to honor those that uphold the process, that respect the Constitution, law and order, and respect for the rule of law. But regretfully, we have a president, unfortunately, promoting a policy of open borders that's unacceptable. It's lawless, and it's creating a dangerous standard in our country.
You talk about the border issue because there you are in Texas. First off, I guess since, as we're celebrating the heritage, so many folks who are making the journey to America. I don't blame them. America is the greatest place in the world. But it is such a difficult journey of people coming from countries like Mexico. Talk about why it is now, especially even more dangerous and more difficult for them. I mean, as you're seeing between cartels and drugs, your heart breaks for them because they come to this country for this better opportunity.
Well, as a military veteran with experience in Afghanistan, but also the Southern Command, which looks at transnational gangs and organizations south of the Mexican border, I can share with you that it's the cartels that are profiting the most from this harmful open border policy. You're absolutely right. They provide a false sense of hope to undocumented immigrants from all parts of the world, not just Central America, but last time I checked with Border Patrol, they tell me over 120 different nations are represented in illegal immigrant encounters on an annual basis. And so we hear estimates ranging from 10,000 to 50,000 for transiting illegals from the southern Mexican border to the Texas southern border. And many are educated by the cartels, the coyotes and smugglers, of our legal loopholes that exist to apply for asylum. And as we've learned, Rita, in the last year and a half, that you're given a notice to appear after about 36 hours to 48 hours of processing. And so we are finding that this loophole is being abused repeatedly. Close to half of the folks that apply for asylum don't even show up, and they blend into the shadows. And so whether it's overstaying travel visas or applying inappropriately for asylum, Secretary Mayorkas in his testimony claims that they're still under legal jurisdiction, maybe in his view of the world, but the reality is that folks are abusing this loophole, taking advantage of the benefits and the programs that are provided to them, whether it's education, healthcare, transportation, and the list goes on. And that's why I go back to honoring those that responsibly wait and patiently go through the process the right way, not the illegal way that unfortunately is being perpetrated by transnational organizations.
You mentioned you are running for the top law enforcement position there in the great state of Texas, George P. Bush, running for Texas Attorney General. How important has service been to your family and especially to you?
Well, public service is, I believe, a higher calling. I think my grandfather put it best that you cannot live a successful and full life unless you have a life devoted to serving others. And whether it was his service in the Pacific Theater as a World War II pilot or my uncle's service to the state of Texas as governor and later as president, I was reared in a family that honors the Constitution, that understands that sacrifice doesn't come or freedom does not come freely, that it has to be sacrificed by people willing to wear the uniform. And I think it's that higher calling that brought me to serve myself in the military. It was actually my grandfather's commissioning of a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, the CVN-77, that inspired me to join the Navy and later deploy to Afghanistan as part of the summer surge in 2010. And that's why I want to offer myself to the people of Texas in this role as the top law enforcement advocate, mainly for our law enforcement. Even in a state like Texas, we've had a defund the police movement in cities like Austin that has resulted in an all-time low morale and retention rate, with vacancies in the hundreds of first responders in cities like Austin and Houston. We also have George Soros-backed DAs that refuse to prosecute repeat offenders, and judges that also allow for violent criminals to bond out, similar to what you see in Manhattan, similar to what you see with DA Gascon in Los Angeles. And that's why I didn't want to sit on the sidelines for this race. I knew that I had to offer something different, somebody that can claim the moral high ground, restore honesty and trust with all of our law enforcement officials, with the legislature, and most importantly, the people of Texas, and electing somebody that they can trust to do the right thing and enforce law.
How important also is it cracking down on repeat offenders? And you see it in all the polls right now. Crime is a huge issue across this country. And I think so many people, especially in the Democratic Party, they are not focusing on this no cash bail. They're not focusing on these soft on crime DAs as you're talking about.
Yeah, regretfully, in our state, we have unfettered prosecutorial discretion, meaning that a district attorney can refuse to honor victims in Texas. And regretfully, we allow, or judges are allowed, to bond out on personal recognizance multiple violent offenders in the state of Texas. And a majority of our violent crime is perpetrated by people that are out on personal bond for another violent crime. And what that means, Rita, for the layman among your listeners, it means that you are able to convince a judge through your attorney or by your own representation that you won't do it again, that you've found a better light in your life, and that you won't commit another crime. And we just have these judges that are activists. And frankly, this is the reason why a lot of conservatives had concerns with Ketanji Brown, because of criminal sentencing guidelines and not following them. In her case, child porn. In the case of Houston judges and Harris County judges, is that they don't follow the criminal sentencing guidelines or don't ask for monetary bond. So what this means is that we have repeat violent offenders back out on the streets with COVID regulations, we had a shutdown of our jury trials and creating a backlog of a whole host of violent criminal cases. And so criminals are smart. They know where jurisdictions are tougher than others, whether you go across. I'm calling you from Galveston County, which is adjacent to Harris County. We just talked to police officers that say if you're going to commit a crime, do it in Harris County, not here, because the DA will come after you with the full force and weight of the law. And you see that play out throughout the country. But in Texas, we're not doing enough to fill in this gap on criminal justice.
Well, bravo for all you are doing and your family has done. You've had really a family enormous history of service. And George P. Bush, we wish you so much luck in your Texas Attorney General race. I know the runoff is coming up soon. And thank you for everything. And again, happy Cinco de Mayo and for everything you've done for this country.
Thank you so much, Rita, for having me. God bless.